Good morning. It's Monday, June the 7th, and not Pearl Harbor, but D-Day. And this is The Drill. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today I'm going to read from the Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. Then we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance, the Star-Spangled-Banner. Then I'm going to read two more of the 10 Global Trends. It's a book that I highly recommend. It's called 10 Global Trends, and I'm going to read two more of those trends, number 6 and number 7, and much more after we come back. Okay, so Daily Declaration for Spiritual Warfare. I have given you the benefits of binding and loosing. The authority that I gave my disciples is the same authority I've given to you. You will be able to drive out evil spirits and to heal disease and sickness. My authority contains the keys to my kingdom, and whatever you bind on earth will be bound in heaven. Whatever you loose on earth will be loosed in heaven. This power to bind is done by my authority. You are set free from the curse of sin, and you have become a slave to me. Because of this, you have received my gift of eternal life and have been given the power to live a life of holiness. Prayer declaration. Father, I have been set free from the law of sin and death through the gift of eternal life from your Son, Jesus. I bind the works of darkness out of my life. I loose myself from any curse of sin that is present through inheritance, genetics, familiar spirits, spoken curses, and other destroying influences. Your power and authority have loosed me from all these chains, and I have become your slave and have determined to live a life of holiness. Amen. And so now we're going to have the Pledge of Allegiance. And now the Star-Spangled Banner. Absolutely beautiful. So again, I read the prayer declaration to remind myself that this is as much a spiritual war as a socio-political war, and I'm talking about the war between conservatives and socialists. And the pledge in the Star-Spangled Banner to remind myself that it's also a war that involves the entire country. That remind myself of what being part of what being a conservative is patriotism, that a socialist cannot be patriotic. They're globalists. Okay, so only conservatives can be patriotic, so as to remind me of that. Now, I'm going to go ahead and read the last two little clips, at least for the last two for the time being. Where is it? There it is. And from a book called 10 Global Trends. And this one is Trend 6, More Land for Nature. The global tree canopy increased by 2.24 million square kilometers between 1982 and 2016. Increased. Reported researchers at the University of Maryland in a September 2018 study in Nature, which is a magazine. That's a land area larger than Alaska and Montana combined. Using satellite data to track the changes in various land covers, they found that gains in the forest area in the temperate, subtropical, and boreal climatic zones are offsetting declines in the tropics. In addition, forest areas expanding even as areas of bare ground and short vegetation are shrinking. Furthermore, forests in mountainous regions are expanding as climate warming enables trees to grow higher up on mountains. Fascinating. Gee, maybe global warming has some positive effects. Maybe that's the way to attack this. Global warming is by saying global warming is our friend, and which has been touched upon by Sean Hannity and others. So, back to the book. A 2011 study in the journal Nature Climate Change estimates that global forest growth and regrowth currently act as a carbon sink, annually taking from the atmosphere 1/3 and 1/4 of the total carbon dioxide emissions from burning fossil fuels. The tree canopy in Europe, including European Russia, has increased by 35%, the greatest gain among all continents. The researchers attribute much of that increase to the natural afforestation on abandoned agricultural land, which has been a common process in Eastern Europe after the collapse of the Soviet Union. The tree canopy in the United States and China has increased by 34% and 15%, respectively. A study notes that the expansion of the agricultural frontier is the primary driver of deforestation in the tropics, where forest cover continues to shrink in countries like Argentina, Brazil, and Paraguay. The new data are counter to the Food and Agriculture Organization's 2015 findings that forest cover had dropped. The disparity between the Maryland and FAO reports arises from the FAO's reliance on data supplied by governments and somewhat different definitions of what counts as forest cover. Expanding woodlands suggests that humanity has begun the process of withdrawing from the natural world, which, in turn, will provide greater scope for other species to rebound and thrive. And that was Trend 6, More Land for Nature, which, of course, all the lefties want you to believe that, again, this is all part of the nature versus natural versus unnatural, and there is no such thing as unnatural. Human beings are as much a part of nature as anyone else. Even if we are in the process of deforesting the planet, so what? Our needs come first. Human beings take priority. That's all there is to it. Trend number 7, Planet City. Growing urbanization is good for both humanity and the natural world. Historically, between 80 and 90% of humanity lived in rural areas and worked in agriculture. As late as 1900, 41% of Americans worked on farms. Today, fewer than 2% do. Before mechanization, farm work was physically exhausting and poorly paid, which helps explain why people started to move from the countryside to the cities. Important, and I'll get to that later. For many people, cities were the engines of liberation. In medieval Europe, for example, serfs who escaped their masters and lived in a city for a year and a day became free from servitude. Hence the German saying, the city air makes you free. Cities are the centers of innovation, engines of growth, and home to the richest segment of the population. Just think of Delhi, London, New York, Shanghai, Seoul, and Tokyo. In fact, the World Bank found no country has grown to middle income without industrialization and urbanization. None has grown to high income without vibrant cities. Urbanization is also good for the environment. On average, city dwellers use less electricity, emit less carbon dioxide, and have smaller land footprints than people living in the countryside. According to the United Nations, the share of humanity living in cities rose. That still leaves over 3 billion people living in rural areas. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development estimates that 85% of the world's population will be urbanized by 2100. That means fewer than 1.5 billion of the projected global population of 9.8 billion will be living in rural areas by the end of this century. So this was 10 Global Trends Every Smart Person Should Know by Ronald Bailey and Marion L. Tupy, T-U-P-Y, and it's on Kindle, and you should get it. Now, the reason that you should get it, first of all, let me do something else. Let me go back to the issue that I raised in a minute. Let me see. Oh, yes. In the first paragraph, he says, before mechanization, farm work was physically exhausting and poorly paid, which helps to explain why people started to move from the countryside to the cities. Now, you'll hear a lot of talk about capitalism and how when capitalism in the 1800s, it was terrible. You worked in factories and the conditions were abysmal. And then you got to think, well, where did these people come from? Where did all these urban people that are working in factories come from? They didn't just spring up out of the earth. Seeds weren't planted and watered, and they just were like corn, and they sprang up out of the earth. Where did they come from? The countryside. Now, why would somebody go ahead? Is a next question. Why would they continue to work in a factory? It's dirty. It's dangerous. Long hours. All that. Why? Why would you do that? Simple. Because as he mentions here, physically exhausting, poorly paid. That no matter how bad the conditions in the factory were, they were 10 times worse on the farm. Okay? You worked all day, every day. You were put in 16, 18-hour days, and maybe more than that. You put in whatever work you needed to, okay, to make that farm run. So if you had to go without sleep for an entire day, that's what you got to do. You know, an emergency comes up, you got to, one of your cows is having a problem foaling or calving or whatever they're doing, then you got to attend to that, even if you are ready to go to sleep. You can't tell them, I'll see you tomorrow. There's no such thing as telling the pigs that need to be fed, I'm sorry, I'm on my break. You just can't do it. And you're doing all of this on spec. All the work you do on a farm is on spec. You're speculating that at the end, when harvest comes in, that you're going to have enough of a harvest and that the market is going to have a high enough price that you're going to actually be able to cover your costs and show a profit. All spec. If something goes wrong, you're not getting paid. You're not getting paid. If there's all of a sudden locusts come along, if there's too much rain, not enough rain, whatever, or the prices, everybody's all of a sudden decided they're going to grow the same kind of crop that you're growing, and so now the market is flooded with your crop, the prices are low, yeah, you're getting paid, but you're not getting paid enough maybe to even cover your bills. Okay, so everything is speculative. You go to work in a factory, every 2 weeks you've got a paycheck. You can count on it. It may not be a lot, and again, you may be working in a place that's dark and dangerous, but you're getting a check every 2 weeks. It's the same thing that you see today. A lot of people working in circumstances psychologically and otherwise that are not good for them, but they continue to work there because of the hypnotic effects of that every 2 weeks getting a paycheck. They're not going to give that up. And that's why most people don't become Donald Trumps, because in order to do that, you're going to have to go out on your own. Okay, and that means that you're going to be in a situation where, again, you're back to the speculative end of things. Even if you're a liquor store owner, you gotta hope that you're going to get enough customers so that you can make enough money to cover the bills and then show a profit. Okay, so you get back into speculation and whatnot. So that's the reason when people are telling you, oh, well, capitalism, the farm or the factories, they were terrible and horrible. You remember, for your own sanity, that the people worked in factories because it no matter how bad they were better than working on the farm. And the other part of it, too, is if you're in a farm, more than likely you're miles away from anyone else. If something goes wrong, you break your leg, now what? And back in the day, they didn't have telephones, much less cell phones. So you got to go send somebody. Go get one of the kids or your wife to jump in the horse and buggy, and go to town or go to the next farm. Whereas if you're working in a factory and you get hurt, there's people right there that can help you and see to it that you get the medical attention that you need. So, and the other thing that with these global trends things is these are not tools or techniques for dealing with the left. The left doesn't care about, they don't care about the statistics. They don't just give a damn about it. All they want to do is shut you down. They want to convert you to socialism or shut you up. Their motto, one of their many mottos, is lead, follow, or get out of the way. Okay? So, what this is for is your sanity. Okay? Because it sounds plausible the way the left, the pictures that they paint. It sounds, it might be true when they're saying that, the perpetuating the myths about capitalism, and when they're saying that human beings are destroying the planet, we're deforesting, we're doing this wrong, that wrong, the other wrong. It sounds plausible, especially if the left is the only source of information you have. So for your own sanity, it's when you're asking yourself, is this true? Is any of this actually true? You need to be able to know with absolute certainty whether it is yes, true, or no, it isn't. Okay? And in this particular case, with the 10 global trends, it gives you the information you need to know about what is actually true vis-a-vis the environment. So-called the environment. What's going on, let's say, globally instead of the environment. Because I contend there's no such thing as the environment. There's only property. Private property and public property. And that's that. So, back in a minute. Thank you. So now I'm going to be reading from the 30 covert emotional manipulation techniques. And so this is again to gain awareness of what it is that the left in this country uses in groups, group-wise and individually, the kinds of techniques that you can expect to be deployed against you by your neighbors, your friends, your coworkers, your relatives, etc. So, number one, covert emotional manipulation tactic is intermittent reinforcement. Here's a quote. When you know what a man wants you to know who he is and how to move him. Another quote. The more infrequently the crumbs of love are offered, the more hooked you are. You become conditioned like a rat in a cage. Unknown. Intermittent reinforcement is an example or is an extremely powerful and effective manipulation tactic. In fact, psychology experts consider it the most powerful motivator in existence. Using this tactic, the manipulator motivates the victim to behave, think, or feel the way he or she wants them to. Intermittent reinforcement occurs when a manipulator gives his victim positive reinforcement, attention, praise, appreciation, affection, sex, adoration, declarations of love, only on a random basis. They may give positive reinforcement in response to a behavior they're trying to increase, or they can withhold it to create uncertainty, anxiety, and longing in the victim. Intermittent reinforcement creates a climate of doubt, fear, and anxiety that compels the victim to persistently seek acts of positive reinforcement from the manipulator that will alleviate their angst. When the reward of positive reinforcement is given, it is very powerful. It floods the brain with dopamine and other feel-good neurotransmitters and hormones. It creates addiction. And another way of looking at this is intermittent reinforcement is the people that you run into in your life that are never happy. They're never satisfied with anything. They always hold out the hope that you're going to be able to make them happy, that you're going to be able to satisfy them, but you're never quite able to do it. You know, you'll hear from them, they'll say, well, that was good, but. Well, that was almost what I was looking for. Almost what I wanted, but. So you hear a lot of that. If you're a victim of this tactic, you will sense the manipulator is withdrawing. He or she is not giving you the attention and affection they used to, and you will fear that something is wrong and that you are losing them. If you ask them if something is wrong, they will deny it or blame you. At some point, the manipulator will act once again like the attentive, romantic, interested, loving person they once were. Your anxiety and doubt are relieved, and you are on top of the world. But then they withdraw again, and you are consumed with anxiety once more. By using intermittent reinforcement, the manipulator will have you riding an emotional roller coaster. Your moods and emotional well-being depend upon whether or not he or she is withholding from you or rewarding you. The manipulator does this on purpose, of course, to increase his or her power and control over you and make you ever more desperate for their love, attention, or approval. And so you see this also on television when I'm thinking of a particular case in which a man was accused of beating his wife or girlfriend, and he was in the sentencing phase, and his wife or girlfriend was standing there making a victim impact statement in which basically she was going the opposite direction. She was claiming that everything was her fault. She was in tears. She was distraught. There was no sense with her that she is achieving justice. There's no sense of, hey, Ace, you're getting what you deserve. You abused me for a long time. I didn't deserve to be abused, so now you're getting yours, kind of thing. No, she was accepting the responsibility. She's in tears. She's distraught over the prospect of him having to go to prison. And why? This is it, the intermittent reinforcement. So she becomes so hooked on his attention and love, now it's going to be withdrawn from her for a period of maybe years. And so how is she going to satisfy her longings, her addiction? Back to the book. Your bond with the manipulator will become stronger in response to intermittent reinforcement, along with your desire to please them and your fear of losing them. This is malicious manipulation at its worst. Intermittent reinforcement is explored more in depth in Chapter 5. 2. Negative reinforcement. Using the tactic of negative reinforcement, the manipulator stops doing something you don't like when you start doing something he or she does like. This makes it more likely that you will do what they like in the future. And again, what makes this rather is, I don't know about heinous, that's the word I was about to use, but it's unnecessary. All this manipulative stuff is doing things the hard way, doing things the long way, when you could simply go to your partner and ask them, okay, hey, I noticed that you do X, Y, Z. I really don't like that. Would you be willing to stop? Would you be willing to change your behavior? And talk to them about it instead of playing these little games, little psycho games, okay? A lot of times you get the psycho game from women in which all of a sudden you get the silent treatment. What's wrong? You know what's wrong. Well, no, I don't. Well, you should. And you should know what's wrong. And why? How can I know what's wrong? Well, if you really loved me, then you get that kind of response, right? And they still don't want to tell you. And you're supposed to guess. And that's another form of psychological manipulation. If you're dating somebody like that, by the way, then of course you want to sit down with them and confront them about that and tell them it's crap. You can't do that. I'm not going to play those kinds of games. And put them on the spot and issue an ultimatum. Either you give up that kind of crap or we're through. And go from there. But don't marry somebody like that. Let's see. For example, back to the book, you behave in some way the manipulator does not want you to. Perhaps you go out with your friends on Friday nights or refuse to participate in some sexual activity that you're averse to. In response, they engage in behavior that hurts you, such as withholding affection or giving you the silent treatment. The manipulator stops withholding affection or giving you the silent treatment when you start acting the way he wants, such as promising to give up your Friday get-together or engaging in the sexual activity he desires. It's very simple. Manipulator knows you are likely to give in eventually in order to stop his or her hurtful actions. It's an effective way to get you to behave the way they want you to and to make you more likely to behave that way again. And I had there's somebody I used to know that did the same thing. They would withdraw, and so you knew there was something that they wanted, and then you had to guess. They weren't going to come out and tell you. Because again, they would say, well, you should know, kind of thing. And that's just crap. But anyways, when you got to the point where you guessed successfully, they took it a step further. Instead of saying, being happy now and, and all that stuff, they would then say, Why do I have to do this? Why do you make me do this? See? So the whole thing is your fault. Not theirs. It's not that they're some kind of a psycho bastard. It's your fault. Okay, so that's like the cherry on top of the sundae for them. Back to the book. 3, backing into an emotional corner. You always overreact. You're unstable. You have a problem with anger. You're crazy. You're a Nazi. A manipulator will say such things after intentionally causing you to have an emotional meltdown. And the left is perfectly good at this, saying or doing things that are designed to provoke you, drive you crazy. You're a misogynist, a homophobe, a Nazi, a racist. You're going to push grandma down the stairs. You hate the poor, on and on. And a manipulator will say such things after intentionally causing you to have an emotional meltdown. The purpose is to create confusing and emotional scene that will distract you from an issue you confronted the manipulator about. The issue instead becomes your apparent emotional instability. This tactic also allows the manipulator to gain more power and control. Here's an example of how this tactic is put into play. You're upset by something a manipulator did, and you confront him or her about it. Perhaps he did something that aroused your suspicion or angered you. The manipulator does not want to confront the issue at hand, so he obfuscates it by turning the focus onto you by using your emotions against you. He does not mention the issue you brought up. Instead, he immediately shifts the focus to your apparent insecurity or jealousy or suspicious nature, which he says is unacceptable. You become defensive, frustrated, and upset. The manipulator seizes on your emotional upset and says something like, "You already know it. I won't tolerate your raising your voice at me." Or, "Is it PMS time again?" Or, "You're not trying to pick another fight, are you?" Or, "I can see you're headed toward one of your meltdowns." This will increase your frustration and make you become even more emotional. Then the manipulator will tell you that he can't deal with this anymore, that he's becoming tired of your drama and your overreaction. At this point, you'll have an emotional meltdown and then collapse into frustrated sobs. The manipulator will announce that you're unstable or crazy or abusive, or that you have an anger management problem, and says that he will leave you if you can't get yourself under control. The manipulator backed you into an emotional corner. Predictably, you came out swinging. The manipulator will storm off in feigned anger and begin a protracted episode of the silent treatment, which is yet another way to avoid the real issue and another manipulation tactic. You're ashamed at how you acted and felt disappointed in yourself. You can't understand why you keep going off the deep end. You'll come to believe that you actually do have an emotional problem, and then one that is sabotaging your previously wonderful relationship. You vow to yourself not to let it happen again, but suppressing your frustration only guarantees that your buttons will be even easier to push next time. You unwittingly enter a vicious cycle with apparently no way out. When you've been backed into an emotional corner, acting out does not mean you're crazy or that you have an anger management problem. It means that you are a normal person reacting to an intensely stressful situation. But when you have an emotional reaction to that stress, you're made to believe you have a problem. Your emotional reactions to manipulation are not the problem. The manipulation is the problem. This is psychological warfare at its lowest. Number 4, shifting the focus. Shifting the focus usually happens along with the tactic of backing into an emotional corner, but it can happen even if you confront a manipulator in a matter-of-fact way, without emotional drama, and he or she has something to hide. With this tactic, you attempt to talk about a concern you have with the manipulator, such as a suspicion that he or she is cheating on you. Instead of dealing with the stated concern, the manipulator simply denies your allegations, expresses incredulity that you can even think such a problem about them or such a thing about them, and then discusses the real problem, your supposed character flaw, such as insecurity or jealousy, making it clear they find it highly unattractive. Since this is yet another tactic that makes you believe the relationship is in trouble and it is your fault, you learn not to ask questions and instead doubt your suspicions in yourself. An interesting and surprisingly common example of shifting the focus. You have strong suspicions that your partner is having an affair. Gaining access to his or her email or text messages reveals evidence that supports your suspicions. You confront the manipulator with the evidence, and the focus is immediately shifted to your invasion of his or her privacy and, ironically, to your lack of trust. Somehow it works. Manipulators will try anything, no matter how outrageous it might be, and they are often successful. When you're immersed in the confusing world they create, normal rules don't seem to apply anymore. Back in a minute. Thank you. More of the 30 covert emotional manipulation techniques on the next episode. And that brings me to the conclusion of this episode of The Drill. And I want to remind you to be honest, be smart, be beautiful, and always remember that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win. And as a postscript, I want to remind everybody to buy my book. I have a companion book to this podcast out called The Drill, and it's for sale on Kindle, and it costs $2.99. If you have Kindle Unlimited, you can read it for free. And so it's, like I said, gives you an idea as to my thinking surrounding this podcast. It also has an excellent section at the back of recommended readings. So again, The Drill, Kindle Publishing, $2.99. Buy it.